quite frankly, I'm a little tired of it, as I'm sure most of you are too, because it doesn't make any sense. They're just trolling us. What's up, y'all? DT2 Comics Chat here. Now, I didn't know if I was going to make a video about this or not because, quite frankly, I'm a little tired of it, as I'm sure most of you are too. But we're going to talk about this Fantastic Four casting snafu, dilemma, problem, conniption, whatever it is, because it doesn't make any sense. First off, I want to say at this point, I'm convinced that they're just trolling us. They're just trolling us now. They're just throwing stuff out there just to, keep us talking about it, just to keep some kind of buzz going. First, Adam Driver was going to be Reed Richards and Margot Robbie was cast as Sue Storm. And I was like, maybe I could see Margot Robbie, but she's always going to be Harley to me now. So it was a little bit of a leap for me to try to see her as Sue, but Adam Driver is not Reed Richards in any way, shape, or form. Could he convince me that he's one of the most brilliant minds on earth and he's the brains behind the Fantastic Four and he could defeat Galactus and he knows it? No. Okay, Adam Driver is just wrong for the role. So at this point, I'm not even sure that was even real because I've heard some other things since then too. I'm not even sure that casting was actually taking place, that they were actually in negotiations. I think that's just something they said, again, to keep the buzz going, okay? Because none of that makes any sense. It cannot possibly be that hard to find a middle-aged brunette actor, a brother and a sister looking set of blonde, not twins, but they look like they came from the same family, and Ben Grimm. Now, since, we're so busy talking about how everything is woke these days, you do know that Ben is Jewish, right? So I want to see Ben's ethnic heritage, his Jewish heritage, his faith beliefs show up in this movie. I really do, because it's an aspect of his character that's been downplayed and it needs to be brought to the forefront. So why? Why do you think they have such a hard time casting the Fantastic Four? I'll tell you why. The main reason they have such a hard time casting the FF is because today's writers don't know what to do with the Fantastic Four. Everything about them is rooted in the time in which they were created, which was the 1960s. So if you look at the original origin of the Fantastic Four, if you look at the Lee and Kirby issue #1, where the team is getting launched, everything about that is rooted in the time in which it was created. If you didn't know, Sue Storm was an actress by profession, but they say that the Fantastic Four got their powers according to their personalities. Well, it was a time where women were expected to be quiet, where women were expected to kind of take a backseat, where women were expected just to be the main character's girlfriend. And so that's why Sue turned invisible, because that was a reflection of how many women felt back in the 60s. Their societal role was to not outshine their husbands or their boyfriends. That's kind of where that idea comes from. A few interesting things I want to point out on this panel. First of all, Ben Grimm has unfortunately been often depicted as maybe kind of dull or kind of slow or kind of stupid or kind of dim-witted or kind of not intellectual. But if you read what's actually happening here, you see that Ben is calling Reed out on his faulty science. That Ben is telling Reed that they don't really know what the cosmic rays are going to do, okay? And that they might kill them all in space. It's the most amazing thing, because very rarely do you see Ben written this way anymore. Like once he became the Thing, they kind of recast him as this lumbering brute, but that's actually never who Ben Grimm was, if you didn't know that. Now, they alluded to this in Fantastic Four, The Rise of the Silver Surfer, when they were analyzing what the Silver Surfer was, and Reed asked Ben, and he talked about it, this thing having a tail, and he talked about the physics of it, and he talked about what it could and could not be. So that was one of the few times they gave a nod to Ben being intelligent, maybe not as intelligent as Reed, but understanding the science behind certain things, which I thought was great, because we rarely see him that way. I want you to look at this panel, look at panel 2, when Sue says, Ben, we've got to take the chance unless we want the commies to beat us to it. Okay, they're talking about the Russians, they're talking about the Communist Party. This is when the Iron Curtain was still there, and it was all about beating Russia to space. All about beating Russia to space. That's where that comes from. So again, that's very much rooted in the time that they're created in. And then finally, this last little panel is hilarious to me because it's like there's two things that are notoriously easy to break into: hospitals and rocket launch facilities. I roll because, oh my goodness, they just ran past, they drew the guard there, they're just running past them, la, 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 la. That cracks me up. But the point I'm trying to make is that these are the roots, the original roots of the Fantastic Four. And so that being the case, today's modern writers don't know how to modernize them without race swapping, okay? You can easily modernize the FF and you don't have to race swap. You don't have to just add woke to try to make it better, okay? You can talk about any of the major world events in the last 20 years. You can even use the shutting down, the official shutting down of NASA a few years ago as the springboard or the impetus or the thing that made Reed Richards want to hurry up and get in space. There are all kinds of things you can do if you want to root them in this time. But the one thing you don't do is make one of them black. The one thing you don't do is gender swap them, okay? The one thing you don't do is change them from who they are in terms of their ethnicity and their gender and all that different kind of stuff, because all of their identities are rooted in who they were created to be. So you can update them and take them out of the 60s frame, but swapping them by race or gender going full woke is not the thing to do. Also, now I thought of this a long time ago, and this has been suggested many times on Twitter. One of the easiest things in the world to do is to keep this origin and then have them go on an adventure or a quest or chasing a nihilist in the negative zone, although they first encountered him there. So maybe they're just exploring, because the Fantastic Four at their core are explorers, not superheroes. So maybe they're exploring in the negative zone. Maybe they get caught up with a nihilist, and then maybe they get stuck there, and then they emerge in today's modern time. Now you have the potential for a lot of fish out of water stories, and now you can do with them like you did with Cap. They're out of their time, they're out of their space, they're out of their familiarity, but now they have to adjust to life in 2023. And if you're wondering why the Fantastic Four never wore masks, John Byrne's run answered that question brilliantly, okay, incredibly. And that Reed in his private moments, he realized what he'd done to his team, what he'd done to his family. At that time, they would have never been able to integrate into society with all the things that they could do. So you know what? Reed said, we're going to become celebrities, because he knew that people would react differently to celebrity superheroes, how they would have been labeled then, because I know it's not, quite the appropriate language now, but back then they would have been called circus freaks. He knew that they would have been captured and analyzed and dissected and put on display and caged and abused if they had presented themselves just as people with power. So he came up with the idea of the costumes, the names, the code names, no masks to show they weren't trying to hide their identities, but that they were actually celebrity superhero explorers. And that's why the world accepted it. Even though, if you know anything about those early issues, Ben had to hide his face a lot. Ben was very bitter. Ben shut down a lot. That shouldn't have made him less intelligent, but he was definitely angry when he realized what Reed had done to him. And he was this misshapen thing, this rock monster, and Reed looked like he had no cure in sight. That's what I'm saying, man. Their backstory is fantastic, and it doesn't need to be jettisoned just because they don't know what to do with it. And there's another very interesting point that's never really talked about, that I talk about all the time, and I'm going to show it to you right now. Here it is, folks. I've been talking about this on Twitter for ages. Ben was in love with Sue. That's why when she called him a coward in that page I just showed you, that's why it stung so badly, because Ben was in love with Sue. And that answer is yes. Yes, I am sure about that. Look right there on the panels. Sue goes, "Run, Reed, darling. He's turned into some sort of a thing. He's strong as an ox." And Ben says, quote, "Reed, dog. Bah. How can you care for that weakling when I'm here?" Next panel. "I'll prove to you that you love the wrong man, Susan. Hey, what?" And that's when Reed begins to stretch. And there you have it, right there. Ben was in love with Sue from the jump. Sometimes there have been little hints in the comics, but Sue always reacts like, Ben's just a big brother. He's her protector. I don't even really think that Sue is ever really aware that Ben loved her like that. But of course, neither one of them would ever act on it because they wouldn't portray Reed in that way, at least not with each other. Because don't get me started talking about Sue and Namor. I may have to do a whole video about that, because if there's anything that torques me off about the Fantastic Four, it's that little love triangle, but I digress. So what I'm going to talk about now is my personal fan cast for the Fantastic Four. I will say for yet one more time in this video, it's not that hard. I'm still going with Krasinski as Reed Richards. Now, we all know that Feige kind of threw us a bone, but it was a bit of a troll because he cast Krasinski as Reed in Multiverse of Madness, which was not a Doctor Strange movie. It was WandaVision Chapter 2, or WandaVision the sequel. Okay, and Wanda destroys Reed Richards in under 3 minutes and turns him into spaghetti string. It was awful. This man deserves another chance as Reed because he's perfect for the role. He could convince me that he is everything that Reed is. He's even a dead ringer for Reed. If Reed were, to walk out of the pages of the book and come into real life, I would absolutely believe he looked like Krasinski. This man deserves another chance, a real chance, to play this character. Next up, we got Krasinski's wife, Emily Blunt, as Sue Storm, the Invisible Girl or the Invisible Woman. No way the two of them shouldn't be together in this film. They would crush at this. Now, the one thing that does make a difference is it depends on how old they're casting the FF in their first adventure. Are they going to make them skew more young? Are they going to make them closer to their real ages? But their real ages in the book, when they got their powers, Sue was like 22, and I'm not sure how much older than her Reed was, maybe 35, maybe 40, but he always had that white, hair streak on both sides of his hair, so maybe Reed was in his 40s, but Sue was quite young. Johnny might have been college age, which is the same age as his sister, but he's the younger of the two, and Ben looked to be in his 30s, so they're really actually kind of all over the place, but they might try to make them all in the same age range. But if they're not as hung up on that and they're more focused on getting the right actors in the roles, I absolutely want Krasinski as Reed and Emily Blunt as Sue Storm, because again, they'll crush it. And you know who really looks like he's the front runner to play Johnny Storm? Now, I know a lot of people want to see Zac Efron, but Zac Efron is not Johnny to me at all. However, this guy, Rudy Pankow, is. I really think he can nail Johnny. I think he's the right age. I think he has the right look. I think he could pull off whatever they need Johnny to be. Now, I loved Chris Evans as Johnny Storm. I didn't think I would, but I really did. However, the way he was written, Johnny is not that cocky, and Johnny's not that headstrong, and Johnny's not that much of a jerk all the time, like the way Evans played him. But I really liked him as Johnny. I thought he did really, really well in the role. But since we're recasting, and he's always going to be Captain America to me now, so I say we go with Rudy Pankow. Right age, right look, right attitude. It'll look like Johnny just walked off the page. And that's another thing. Even though we have high profile A-listers as Reed and Sue, that can work, but you also want to have at least one lesser known actor in there, because that kind of anchors it, because you want the actor to disappear into the character. Both Krasinski and Blunt have the acting chops to make that happen. But for Johnny, I'm perfectly cool with going with a relative unknown, because when I watch this, I want to see Johnny Storm on the screen, not somebody that's trying to convince me that they're Johnny Storm, but failing. And by that, I do mean Michael B. Jordan. Okay, Fantastic Four 2015. There was nothing about Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm. Nothing. Don't even argue with me about it. As soon as I heard that casting, I was like, this thing's gonna be a mess. Whoever did the casting, I know Trank, wrote and directed, but I'm like, this is a mess from day one, because you have no idea who Johnny Storm is, and you're wrong from the jump. And sure enough, Fantastic Four 2015 is one of, if not the worst, comic book movies of all time. Now, you might be surprised by this choice, but I think this is completely on point. Michael Kudlitz as Ben Grimm. He just looks like Ben to me. He's made me believe he could pull off Ben. Just everything about his energy feels like Ben would feel to me. And Kudlitz even liked my tweet on Twitter. That's what that picture is, this picture right here. Because I put him in my fan cast, because I used the hashtag this ought to be with my fan cast, and he liked it. So that lets me know that he's down. Michael himself myself is down with playing Ben. I really think because Ben is the most nuanced character out of all of them. Ben has intelligence. Ben has a depth and a warmth and a huge heart, but then he's got to go through that bitterness and that anger. And I think Chiklis did a great job in Fantastic Four 2005. It just happened too fast. In the comics, that happened over years, where Ben finally accepted himself as a thing. So I know we wouldn't have necessarily have more time in a film, but I would like for it to have more time, to have the whole movie. Maybe Ben stays, bitter and dark and heavy. Maybe he doesn't, start to lighten up and become the ever-loving blue-eyed thing that we know until the second or perhaps third movie. I think MC could pull all of that off because, again, the most nuanced character, the most subtle character, the character where you've got to understand everything that's going on without a lot of overt gestures with Ben, because Ben has so much going on in his head. His love for Susan, his disgust at being this rock monster, he is trying to adjust. He is realizing that if he gives up his powers and becomes normal again, he can't be a part of the team because he can't turn it on and off like the other three. I mean, there's just so many good things about this character. And I think that Coolidge is the actor to pull that off and convince us that he's Ben Grimm, to disappear into the character and show us all the shades of Ben, that you will, the shades of orange that we need to see to believe that that's Ben Grimm on the screen. It's clobbering time. Make it so. So in conclusion, I want to say it one more time. It's not that hard, okay? So they need to hire me. They need to give me a call and let me write the script, because I actually already have a Fantastic Four script. I don't know if I ever told y'all that, but I do. And so I'm not going to tell you anymore, because in case it happens, I want you to be surprised. I don't want you to refer to this video where I gave up all the spoilers, but I do have a Fantastic Four treatment, and they need to call me, okay, because it's not that hard to bring this team to life. And I love them. This is my favorite superhero team. This is one of the first comic books I started reading in my life when I was a child. And I want to see them done right. They keep trying and failing, trying and failing, trying and failing. So maybe it's time to stop arguing with the genius and the established backstory of Lee and Kirby, and rather honor it and respect it and build upon it. How about that? All right, that's it for this Rant Room. Check out my Rant Room playlist, because I talk about, Lord, my fingers disappearing. I'm turning invisible like Sue Storm. Ooh. So check out the Rant Room playlist, where I talk about so many things in geekdom that just get on my nerves. And I know, at least for some of y'all, they get on your nerves too. I'll see you in the next video.